My father gave my sister everything. The house, the business, the memories, all tied neatly in legal ribbons, just not for me. I sat there in a lawyer's office that smelled like dust and denial, listening to my entire family legacy slip quietly into my sister's perfectly manicured hands. She smiled, of course. The same smile she's worn since childhood, sugar on the surface, poison underneath. I wasn't even mentioned. Not a watch, not a word. And just as I was about to stand up and walk away from a life that clearly didn't want me, the lawyer cleared his throat again. "There's one more document," he said. He reached into a leather folder, pulled out a yellowed envelope, and handed it to me. That was the moment her fake smile cracked. That was the moment everything changed. Growing up, I learned early that love in our house had a hierarchy. And I wasn't on top of it. My sister Victoria was the golden girl. Straight A's, ballet recitals, charm that could melt granite, at least in public. Behind closed doors, she was different. Sharp, strategic. The kind of child who colored inside the lines, just to make sure you noticed she'd done it better than you. Me? I was the background character in our family portrait. My drawings were messy. I liked mud more than music. I asked questions no one answered. Especially my dad. He adored Victoria with the kind of affection that didn't trickle, it gushed. His eyes lit up when she walked into a room, and dimmed slightly when I followed. I used to think it was my fault. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. Maybe I didn't sparkle the way she did. But eventually, I stopped trying. At dinner, Victoria would dominate the conversation. Dad would laugh, nod, ask her opinion about everything from sports to stocks. Meanwhile, I sat silently, scraping the sides of my mashed potatoes, waiting for someone to remember I was there. He once gave her the keys to his old Mustang on her 18th birthday, complete with a red bow on the hood. I got a pat on the back and a Target gift card. But I wasn't bitter. Not yet. Because Grandpa Henry, me father's father, he saw me. He'd visit a few times a year from his tiny place in the mountains, smelling like pine and pipe smoke. He'd listen to me ramble about books and ideas I didn't quite understand, and he'd never interrupt. Once, when I was maybe 10, he leaned down and whispered, "One day, Kate, you'll grow into your own kind of gold, not the shiny kind, the buried kind, the real kind." I didn't know what he meant. Not then. But I remembered it. Especially now, sitting in that lawyer's office, invisible again until that envelope appeared. Victoria had already won the house, the company, and my father's public pride. But something about that envelope, its creases, the faded ink, the way the lawyer handled it like it might bite, told me this wasn't some throwaway note. This was something meant for me. And maybe, just maybe, it was the one thing my father hadn't controlled. The lawyer passed it to me with quiet formality, his eyes flicking toward Victoria's perfect posture and the tiniest twitch in her jaw. She didn't like surprises. Especially not ones addressed to me. The envelope was old, thick parchment, yellowed with time, sealed with wax that bore a faint imprint, a tree with deep roots. It was Grandpa Henry's symbol. He used to carve it into walking sticks, sketch it in the corners of birthday cards. I broke the seal with fingers that trembled more than I expected. The letter inside was handwritten in his careful, looping cursive, each word like it had been carved, not written. "Dear Kate, if you're reading this, then the world has tried to erase you. Again." I swallowed hard. "But you were never meant to follow their path. You were meant to find your own off the road, past the noise, where the real things live. Things that can't be inherited, only discovered." The letter spoke of a small piece of land, 40 acres in the Shenandoah foothills, legally transferred to my name 5 years ago through a private trust. My name. Mine. Not Victoria's. Not my father's to give or take. The lawyer confirmed it with a few crisp sentences and a document older than the one he'd read earlier. The land was mine, along with a barn, a spring, and, as Grandpa wrote, something worth far more than a house full of polished wood. I looked up to see Victoria frozen in her chair, her smile calcified into something brittle and cracking. She blinked slowly, as if her reality was buffering. I could see it unraveling behind her ice-sure control, her image, the certainty that she'd won everything. "How quaint," she said finally, her voice dipped in condescension. "A barn? Are you planning to raise goats or just collect dust?" I didn't answer, not because I didn't have words, but because I finally understood that silence can be louder than any retort. The lawyer handed me a key rusted, oddly shaped, cold in my palm. It felt like something from a fairy tale, or a trap. Either way, it was mine. As we walked out of that office, Victoria stormed ahead, her heels stabbing the marble floor like it had personally betrayed her. I stayed behind, staring at the letter again. At the last line. "Find the oak, listen for the spring, and don't dig until you're ready to grow." It wasn't just a letter. It was a map. And for the first time in my life, someone in my family hadn't just seen me. They'd chosen me. It took me 5 hours and 2 missed turns to find the property. 40 acres, Grandpa had said. But no one mentioned the acres were mostly overgrown brambles and a leaning barn that looked one thunderstorm away from collapse. I sat in my beat-up Honda, staring at the field of weeds that reached waist-high in some places. The wind pushed them in waves, like the land itself was exhaling. "This is it?" I whispered to no one. "This is the big secret?" The barn sat like an old man with a bad hip, crooked, slouched, proud despite the years. One side had caved in. The roof had more holes than shingles. I unlocked the door with the rusted key. It groaned open, dust pouring out like sighs from forgotten memories. The inside smelled like mildew, mice, and dry wood, but there was something else, too. Something familiar. Pipe smoke. Just a trace, barely there, but it hit me like a memory. I used to sit on Grandpa's porch and listen to him talk about how land remembers. I never understood what he meant. Now, I wasn't sure I didn't. Inside, there was nothing valuable. No gold bars or secret machines, just rusted tools, old crates, a coil of rope so dry it cracked in my hands. But then I saw it. Tucked behind a beam, hidden beneath a pile of hay that had long since turned to dust, was a small wooden box. The lid bore the same tree with roots symbol. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, a folded piece of cloth, a mason jar filled with dirt, and a letter, sealed in wax, like the one from the lawyer's office. "Kate," the new letter read, "I knew you'd come." His handwriting was familiar, steady, measured. The others chase what shines, but you see what breathes. He described the land. Said it sat on a freshwater spring that had once nourished an entire hillside orchard, long before my father paved over dreams for lumber contracts. The cloth held a handful of tiny, shriveled bulbs, plants, maybe seeds. "You won't recognize these," he wrote, "but they recognize you. These bulbs only bloom under patience, sweat, and quiet faith. They're nothing special to most eyes, but planted right, they grow gold." My breath caught. He wasn't being metaphorical. He meant real saffron. The most expensive spice in the world. I looked down at the bulbs, again brown, dry, almost disappointing. But something flickered in my chest, a feeling I hadn't let myself have in a long time. Possibility. I walked outside and stood in the middle of the field. The sun was sinking behind the trees, painting the land in amber light. No applause, no inheritance ceremony, just silence. And yet, I felt more seen here among rotting boards and forgotten soil than I ever had in my father's house. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's see what you've got." The wind picked up slightly, brushing against my hair like someone saying, "Finally." I didn't plant the bulbs right away. For 3 days, I just walked the land. Mornings were filled with dew and bird calls. Evenings brought long shadows and silence that felt older than me. I found the oak tree Grandpa had mentioned in his first letter, massive, twisted, like it had been standing there since the earth cooled. Near its roots, hidden beneath tangled weeds, I discovered the spring. Cold, clean, flowing, just like he said. I dropped to my knees and cupped the water in my hands. It tasted wild untouched. I couldn't stop smiling, not because I understood the full picture yet, but because I finally belonged somewhere. The next morning, I cleared a patch of land with nothing but a shovel, a rake, and my bare hands. It wasn't glamorous. It was blistering, dirty, muscle-aching work. But it felt real. Each hole I dug for the bulbs felt like planting a question. Will this work? Was Grandpa just being poetic? Am I crazy? But I kept going. Every afternoon, I reread his letters, studying the scribbled drawings and planting instructions he'd included in the margins. I Googled saffron crocus cultivation, using the Spotty service from a local diner's Wi-Fi. I watched YouTube videos made by farmers in Iran and Spain. By the end of the week, I had 15 neat rows. I planted each bulb like it was a secret, covered them gently, whispered things I'd never said out loud. Things like, I'm not a failure. I'm not invisible. I'm not her. Victoria's voice still echoed in my mind, sometimes sharp, dismissive, cruel in the way only family can be. But it was fainter here. Easier to silence with wind and dirt and effort. I started sleeping in the barn fixed, a corner with a camping cot, a lantern, and a crate for a table. The walls creaked at night like they were remembering too. There were no texts from my father, no calls from anyone, actually. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I woke up early, stretched my sore arms, and checked the soil like it held a secret just under the surface. And one morning, it did. A thin green shoot, delicate, almost shy. Then another. And another. They were growing. I dropped to my knees, laughing, crying, maybe both. Not because I was about to be rich, because I wasn't. Not yet, maybe not ever. But something I had planted with my own hands was alive. And that was enough. For now. By the time the blossoms came, the locals had already given me a nickname. The Dirt Girl. Not exactly flattering, but I took it. It meant they noticed. I had been working for nearly 4 months sunup to sundown learning how to care for saffron. I didn't just plant, I studied. I took notes. I experimented. I failed, overwatered, redug, replanted, and failed again. But eventually, the earth started listening. The bulbs bloomed into delicate purple flowers, each cradling 3 fragile red threads, the actual saffron. I harvested them one by one. Tweezers, gloves, steady hands. It was work that demanded patience, precision, intuition. It felt like I was training not just my hands, but my heart. And then, Sarah arrived. Not Sarah the friend, not a neighbor. No, Sarah was Victoria's assistant. Blonde, ice-polite, and terrifying in the way spreadsheets can be. She showed up in heels and sunglasses, stepped out of a rented black SUV, and smiled like someone who already knew the ending to your story. Miss Blackwood, she greeted, extending a hand I didn't take. Victoria asked me to stop by. She's very impressed with your little venture. Little? Of course. She believes there's potential synergy in collaborating, perhaps forming a joint venture capitalizing on your progress and her connections. I almost laughed. Tell her no. Sarah blinked. Sorry? I said no. I wiped dirt from my palms onto my jeans. There is no joint venture. There's no synergy. This land is mine. This crop is mine. She doesn't get to claim a single petal. The next visit came 3 days later. Victoria herself. She didn't announce it, just drove up in a pearl-white BMW that looked absurd against the mud path. She stepped out like she was walking onto a red carpet full makeup, heels stabbing into the ground, eyes scanning everything with her usual mix of admiration and judgment. Kate, she said, voice like syrup with a razor inside. You've done something unexpected. I didn't answer. She took a long breath, pretending to be moved by the landscape. This is what Grandpa left you? All this? I nodded, and I earned every inch of it. She walked up to the barn, running her fingers across the newly fixed door frame. It's actually kind of charming, rustic, sellable. There it was. The real reason she came. She had seen the local paper's profile on my farm. She had heard that a chef in Richmond had placed an order. She had seen the videos I'd been quietly posting, time lapses of planting, harvesting, voiceovers with Grandpa's words. And she wanted in. I'm proposing a merger, she said. You and me, sisters, legacy. You've got something real here, but I can help scale it, expand the reach, bring in investors. I looked at her, stunned. You ignored me my whole life, I said quietly. Mocked me, watched Dad erase me and never once said a word. And now you want equity in something you didn't believe in, didn't build, and didn't care about. Her expression sharpened. The smile vanished like a flipped switch. Don't be naive, she snapped. You think one season of flowers makes you a businesswoman? I've run a company for 7 years. This isn't personal, it's smart. And if you refuse to play ball... She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. Legal documents. I found inconsistencies in the way Grandpa's trust was witnessed. Dates don't line up. One of the signatories passed away a month before the document was dated. If I wanted to contest it in court, I might win. Her voice was calm, cold, calculated. Like always. You're bluffing. Try me. She dropped the envelope at my feet like trash. This is your chance, Kate, she added. Be smart, let's win together. Or, lose alone. I didn't pick it up. I watched her walk away, her heels sinking into the soft earth like tiny knives. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the barn floor, Grandpa's letters spread around me like armor. I reread the one about the spring, the bulbs, the oak. Don't dig until you're ready to grow. Was I ready? Victoria had money, lawyers, influence. I had a field of flowers and a box of handwritten wisdom. But I also had something else. Conviction. I folded the letters carefully, put them back in the wooden box, and stood up. The next morning, I called a lawyer. A real one. Then I called a journalist. Then I walked into the field and picked another blossom and held it in the light. It shimmered, not like gold, but like truth. And I whispered, to the flower, to the land, and maybe to Grandpa. She's not taking this from me. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because it had rained the night before, and the air smelled like wet earth and something clean. I had just posted a photo of the morning harvest rows of tiny purple flowers glistening in the dew. By noon, the farm was on fire. I saw the smoke, first black, thick, rising from behind the barn like the earth had split open. I dropped everything and ran. The rows were burning. The saffron I had planted, cared for, bled for, devoured in flames that moved faster than logic. The barn's side wall was charred, the field was ash. And I collapsed. Not just from exhaustion, but from disbelief. Someone had said it, that much was clear. The fire chief confirmed it. Accelerant had been used, intentional, targeted. Someone wanted this gone, he said, and fast. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there in the middle of it all, covered in soot, smelling of smoke, staring at the field that once made me feel invincible. Now, it felt like a joke. All of it. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I was never meant to win. I spent that night in the shell of the barn, too numb to sleep. Grandpa's letters were safe, they'd been in a tin box beneath the floorboards. But everything else? Gone. Gone. At some point past midnight, I opened one of the older letters again, not for answers, just to hear his voice in my head. The fire clears what's false. Real roots grow deeper after the burn. I read it again, and again, until the words became a drumbeat in my chest. And then I remembered something. Under the floorboards, near the north wall, the boards I hadn't pried open yet. Grandpa had once written, "Save this for the darkest day." My fingers scraped the wood raw, trying to find it. And I did. A weathered tin box wrapped in burlap, buried under decades of dust. Inside, a stack of cash. real cash, and a note. For when they try to burn you down, build anyway. That's when I cried. Not from grief, but from knowing that even now, even when everything had turned to ash, Grandpa had still believed in me. Enough to plan for my lowest moment. The next morning, I ordered seeds, more bulbs, new tools, and I posted a video, not polished, not perfect. Just me, standing in blackened dirt, holding the note, telling the truth. And something happened. People listened. The regrowth came slowly, just like healing does. One bulb at a time, one hand-dug furrow, one quiet morning. People from town stopped by with seeds, tools, food, strangers sent letters, donations. One woman mailed me a single crocus bulb with a note. It's not much, but I believe in what you're planting. The land didn't pity me. It didn't apologize. It just waited ready when I was. And I was. I rebuilt, replanted, relearned. And this time, the flowers bloomed brighter. The red threads glowed like fire-forged gold. Victoria never came back. Maybe she couldn't face what I'd built. Maybe she thought it was over. But I didn't need her apology. I had something better. Peace. Real peace. The kind that comes when you know you've built something with your own hands, your own pain, your own grit. Not inherited. Not handed down. Chosen. Cultivated. Earned. And Grandpa. His handwriting now lives on every jar we ship. His words still echo when I walk the rows. He didn't leave me land. He left me a lesson. That the truest kind of legacy isn't what's written in a will. It's what you're brave enough to grow when no one believes you can. And I grew it. With dirt under my nails, and fire in my chest. From nothing, I made something. From silence, I found my voice. And from ashes, I built gold.